They say December is the best time of the year, and while I might not necessarily agree with that from a weather perspective, we do have early signing day. I'm Carson Fox. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports, and we are going to talk about high school football recruiting, one of my favorite loves to talk about as it pertains to the West Virginia University football program, and what a day it was yesterday for the Mountaineers. Sorry, wasn't able to bring you this video last night. I just unfortunately dealing with a bit of a cold, so I didn't think that I was going to be able to bring this video to you as best as possible. So sorry for the wait, but bringing it to you a day later, and I guess with a little more hindsight, a little more analysis on these players, because West Virginia did have a couple of late additions on early signing day. Remember a year ago when West Virginia flipped Day Farmer from UCF, and that was really the key splash recruitment for the 2023 class. So got to know a little bit more about Dwayne Galloway, got to know a little bit more about Julian Horton. But for what I want to talk about more so for this, I want to take big picture. I want to kind of take a look at the overall thoughts on the class, my analysis of West Virginia football's high school recruiting strategy as it pertains to West Virginia's retention efforts, both with current players and then also going into the transfer portal, and looking kind of back at the last couple of years, looking at this year's class, and there's still so much unknown. So as I record this video here, Thursday, December 5th night, because of the impact of a new head coaching signing. So, first and foremost, I just want to say I'm really, really rooting for the 21 members of this class for their desire, first and foremost, to join the West Virginia University football program. Unideal circumstances with Neal Brown being fired, their head coach that they thought they were going to be playing for 3 days prior to early signing day. I talked about that at the end of the senior day game against UCF, that it would have given these players a little bit more time to prepare, but who knows whether that was a good or a bad thing when you consider about how many players that West Virginia was able to retain out of this recruiting class and retain their commitments and get them to sign. And that's just unfortunately the case with today's college football recruiting calendar. The off-season begins while one season is still going on, all in the name of accommodating spring semester enrollees. I can't believe that what was being done for so many years just got nuked, I feel like, in the last 5, going from a signing day of February, moving it all the way up until December 4th. Like, way too early, I feel like. But I get it that a lot of these players now in high school are trying to finish their high school seasons early, finish their high school seasons, turn around, graduate high school. Off they are to get into the strength and conditioning programs. Off they are to start making money off their NIL deals. Off they are to start getting their college credits early, to get a part of spring practice. And then, bam, full-fledged, ready to go as true freshmen. But still, most end up redshirting. So it's a lot of effort that really just throws a curveball into everything from a football operational perspective, all for those players just to be able to enroll early. So, and I also want to say, first and foremost, thank you to the assistant coaches and WVU recruiting staff who did not stop recruiting, continued to recruit even after head coach Neal Brown was fired. And still considering that their 2025 employment status at WVU is totally in limbo. Have no idea whether the new head coach is going to retain all or any of the assistant coaches or want to bring in his entire staff. And that's, going down even to recruiting directors and other, staff that aren't, you don't see necessarily on Saturdays on the sidelines. So, when you see other schools like North Carolina's class fall apart, Purdue's fall apart, UCF's fall apart, each of them only having 6 signees on signing day respectively, all because of head coach firings, it just goes to show that the coaches still at West Virginia still wanted to get those players to be here and they still want to be there as well. I don't think you give that kind of effort and still, I bet the conversations are still, truthful and honest, but like their intentions are still to be here. To coach these players. So that's what I mean. There are a lot of relationships, and I'm going to get into each player, break by go chronologically through this last. It really even spans about 18 months, 15 months of recruiting to get to this day, and how are each player going to be impacted by the job status of their position coach or assistant coach who's recruited them. That's to be determined. And I think there also is a bit of an elephant in the room that's going to happen for this season that nobody's necessarily talking about. And it is the roster limit change from scholarship limit that's happening because of the House settlement coming down. That now teams are going to essentially get rid of walk-ons. Every single player is going to have some sort of a name, image, and likeness package attached to them because of the way that schools are now going to revenue share with players. So they're employees, but they're not. And what is this world going to look like in college football? Absolutely nobody knows. But, West Virginia wants to get, at least these assistant coaches want to get these high school players as a part of this program because, the fear is, that they might get locked out of a scholarship or roster potential at a different school depending upon what happens with their, roster management over this offseason and the transfer portal. And I feel like Country Roads Trust in tandem with WVU are going to honor these 25 signees packages, deals that were, extended while Neal Brown was the head coach. And that is totally separate and independent upon this new head coach, because this new head coach might want to let some players walk. They might not necessarily fit what the new head coach wants to do. If the new head coach goes in and signs new offensive and defensive coordinators and just, certain players don't fit the mold, that's why I think so. On the players' part, is they wanted to accept it and strike while the iron is hot, because and while I still think that roster management and the entire operation needs to be recalibrated at WVU, which I'm going to put a pin in and come back to, I just think that's kind of what we're dealing with, so that we have to just continue to monitor this situation with these new players come in with the current players over the course of the next few months as the transfer portal officially opens. But we've already seen some West Virginia players declare that they are going to transfer, so it's a very tenuous, fluid situation that I don't think it's going to settle itself out until we're talking come August. So but what I mean to say is what's coming to college football, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here before I give you all about this signing day as it pertains to WVU, is that we are going to start to see, this is like the first aspect, the first wave of this that's going to happen now over the course, it's going to happen quickly, or faster than people think. But it is going to be imbalanced roster sizes. The behemoths of the sport, the Ohio States, the Texases, Alabamas, they are going to be okay. The ones, and it's really going to be dependent upon a few certain things. It's going to be dependent upon TV revenue sharing. In the way that ESPN and Fox manipulate the SEC and the Big Ten, respectively. The money that through their TV deals, their college football playoff deals, everything that comes into those institutions via those payments, plus NIL fan support. And you might say to yourself, hey, look, Carson, it's on the institutions now to share revenue with their players. Yes, you're right. But now that collectives are starting to come in-house, what they're going to try and do is drive as many donations as humanly possible, because they will be now 501c3 tax-free, tax-free write-offs. Whereas under old collectives, which aren't 501c3 nonprofit, you can't do that. So they're going to try and drive as much money in-house through the revenue sharing, through the NIL collectives coming in-house, and also any sort of private equity or sponsorships. That you're already seeing that happen with Memphis, for example, with FedEx. That's why I do not think, and this is funny to see on Twitter about a couple of West Virginia burner accounts and all this tweeting Sheets saying we need to call it Sheets Stadium at Mountaineer Field. Absolutely, in a heartbeat. As a growing company across the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, absolutely. West Virginia, and I don't think Ren Baker is ignorant to this fact or isn't working or wouldn't entertain the ideas, but you're going to start seeing nuclear options by teams in the Big 12 and the ACC, especially if they get locked out of this college football playoff bracket next week, is that these teams have to drive as much revenue as humanly possible, because that is then going to be spread, and what is unknown is how equally that has to be to the football players. So what I mean by that is guys, in the case of a brand new signee, Brandon Homedy, who might be West Virginia's fourth string tackle, is going to be paid equally to, say, West Virginia's best player, Nico Marchiol, for example. And you might say to yourself, Carson, how does that make sense? Well, what's going to eventually happen is if it's manipulated and you're talking about one player getting played X, one player getting played, X divided by 10, that's just discrepancy between players. And because it all becomes from one body, one institution, one NIL operation in West Virginia University, there will be, lawsuits galore. And it's not just because of at places like a West Virginia. It's going to happen everywhere across the country. And I'm not even to the point yet of talking about Olympic sports, and I'm talking about women's sports. Whether we're talking about the biggest college sports for women, basketball and softball, namely, is just, I don't know how this is going to be done. I've tried to read up on this as much as humanly possible, and I still just think it's going to take one lawsuit here, one lawsuit there, until things are piecemealed and fractured again, and we're going back to separating the collectives from the institutions. What I think that the institution, and rightfully should do, is share its revenue from its TV deals with its athlete respective to its sport. I'm sorry, but if women's college basketball is just driving a number that is a fraction of what college football is bringing in, why do they have to be paid equally? I understand, and that's what's going up through the courts, or in regards to Title IX that Congress is trying to work out. We know how that's so slow as humanly possible. Maybe things figure itself out with the new administration starting in January, and some government officials wanting to pay attention to this and try and figure this out. But that is the thing, is all of the collectives are going to start to come in-house in the opportunity of driving the war chest as big as humanly possible, so that then its players can be all paid. You're overpaying some younger players and underpaying some stars, but at least everybody is getting probably paid by the aggregate more so. So than the different discrepancies of what they're getting now. So what that means is that you have to get to a number on the roster that you as an institution are comfortable about with distributing out. And there are going to be some programs out there that you slice the pie so many different ways, and now you're just not being competitive with the other team. So you might see, because the money is so big at places like Texas, Ohio State, and you're seeing places like, let's just say, throw out a place like Wake Forest, they're going to be able to have a 105 player roster. Every single player have a full, what is previously known as a full scholarship with an NIL deal attached to it. And a team like Wake Forest might only have a 53-man roster, just like the NFL. Now, those players might be being paid, a fraction, maybe it's a 50% percentage as to what they would be playing against Alabama, or my example was Texas. But you're going to see on the sidelines a team like Wake Forest have half as many players as a team like Texas. And that is what's going to cause the chaos to erupt. That's going to lead to new realignment, to the newly formed Division I of these institutions, these programs that are going to be able to fund comprehensively with the revenue share component, with the NIL component, to the most competitive level. And whether that's 40 teams, whether that's 30 teams, whether that's 50 teams, that is what we will see over the course of, I feel like, these next 5 years, as the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC TV deals start to, play into their later years, and they're looking at trying to then re-up. And Fox and ESPN will try, I feel like, or maybe some other media entities will come in there, and that is where we will officially have the break off of the new Division I. Doesn't matter whether it's a Big Ten team currently as they are, or an SEC team as they are, but those teams are obviously going to have a leg up on the advantage. You will just have some institutions, I feel like, who do not want to keep up with the keeping up to the Joneses of college football revenue sharing, and I'm calling it revenue sharing, but it's just total payment to players, to the extent that it needs to be able to be competitive to that level. Now, and that's what I think will be determined over these next 5 years. And it's going to look so funky because, again, you're going to see these rosters that look big for some team, and you're going to see more. And okay, here's to put it practically, the fact that Travis Hunter was like so much of a unicorn as a two-way player, you're going to see more of that now. You're going to see, this guy could play a decent cornerback and a decent wide receiver. This guy could play a decent running back and linebacker. We're paying him. Why not pay one player for two positions? And then that saves the money that's invested in a roster spot. Now, we know injuries pile up. You can't, unlike the NFL, you can't trade players. You can't have free agency. You can't have all of that. So that's what's going to be such a strange iteration to roster management of college football teams. I don't think anymore, some mid programs, I say mid in terms of in athletic department revenue, fan base support. Your multi-millionaire, billionaire boosters are going to mean ever more than ever before. Your connection to opportunities with sponsorships and or private equity, those can make or break you. And it seems like making a private equity deal is dancing with the devil. But no longer, I feel like, are you going to see players on the roster who don't have an opportunity to play for that season. Like that with the transfer portal, with the way. So what that's going to lead to is more targeted high school recruiting. And then, a lot more of additions in transfer portal for more proven commodities. Less risk on current college players. There's more risk on high school players. And are you really going to put them on your team, which then again lessens the amount of money that can go to all the other players? You're going to have to pay that player potentially to just ride the bench in what would be previously known as redshirting. I don't know. I don't think that's going to be the case. You're only going to see high school players at the Division I Power 4 level get added if they feel as if they can have an early contribution. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all chutzpah. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Am I ludicrous? I do a lot of reading on this. I talk to a lot of people. But that is the way that I see things going from here on out because of the House settlement and what's changing to college football. So coming back now with that all in perspective, now with that all in context, let's talk about the overall thoughts on this year's class. Chronicle the last 12 months of commits, 15 months, others committing elsewhere, decommits, all culminating with yesterday. And within that, who has the opportunity to play early, their future outlook, and the outlook of the position grouping. So where West Virginia fell or rose nationally, however you want to call it. Rivals is just the website that I use the most, I feel like, for high school recruiting. 44th nationally, 1 4-star, 17 3-stars, 3 2-stars. DeAndre Desanor was a 4-star on Rivals, downgraded to a 3-star. Amir Leonard John Charles was a 4-star, downgraded to a 3-star. And Dwayne Galloway was a 4-star, downgraded to a 3-star. So if there's bias, I definitely think there is on Rivals against, again, non-blue blood schools like West Virginia out there, taking guys who are committed to, or uncommitted, thinking like they have a nice offer sheet. They pick West Virginia, then they get downgraded to a 3-star. It's just ludicrous, but it is the industry. For 247, West Virginia came in 46th nationally. The only 4-star on the list, according to 247, was Taylor Brown, and I'll talk about him. On 3 ranks West Virginia 50th, ESPN 50th. So looking at where West Virginia has fallen during the Neal Brown era in terms of high school recruiting rankings, last year 42nd, 2023 44th, 2022 30th, 2021 47th, 2020 29th. And then the 2019 class, which was really Dana Holgerson's that Neal Brown hung on to once he was hired in January of 2019, 46th. So this really fits part of the course, even with Neal Brown being fired, or where Neal Brown led West Virginia teams were finishing in recruiting rankings. Better than last year's class, despite where the ranking is, and I'll talk about that, namely because I feel like of the momentum that picked up over the summer after West Virginia had a 9-3 or 9-4 season last year, culminating in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Really picked up, I feel like, of like how West Virginia could be attracted to some of these recruits. And also, some assistant coaches just really had worked on relationships that took over a year or more's worth of development, and like it paid off in this class. But still, and this is kind of my critique of like a Trey Nair-led high school recruiting effort, is that sometimes, and working in tandem with the assistant coaches and all of that jazz, West Virginia, I feel like, takes a Johnny Majors-like approach to some position groups in recruiting, spreading the scholarships out to some players who may not be D1 Power 4 caliber, in hopes that they may get into Mike Joseph's strength and conditioning program, Haley Bishop's nutrition program, a year or 2 or 3 or even 4. They might be ready to play. And that's what I'm saying I think is coming to change, that you can't do that necessarily anymore. You can't sign so many players at a position group hoping that one commits. Like, that's what I mean by the Johnny Majors approach, because back in the 1970s, whenever you could really, kind of like today to a certain extent, but you could have as many on the roster as you wanted to. And Johnny Majors signed how many? I think it was like 7 running backs or something. And out of that one, he found Oh, why am I now blanking on it? Dallas Cowboys running back. Went to Pitt, you know. Oh my gosh. Tony Dorsett. Thank you. Sorry. Freud, you just dad brain fog there. So, again, back in the 70s, Johnny Majors floods his team full of players in the hopes that he can find a diamond out of the rough, and he finds Tony Dorsett. So that is a very extreme case to what I'm talking about here, but that is what I feel like is that like West Virginia has kind of like overextended itself in players of lesser caliber, hoping that they would find one diamond in the rough, one gem, and those players would ultimately, transfer out if they didn't necessarily make it. Kind of a case in point, like a couple of transfers. I feel like that, and I talk about this on this program pretty frequently. A guy like Braden Dudley last year, never thought he'd see the field at West Virginia. But then there's guys like this year who I was really, really thinking that he could break into the two deep, but when he wasn't on the Big 12 Media Day member, Raleigh Collins already announcing his transfer, I just thought to myself, that there's a case right there. Now, for the certain few players recently in recent classes who displayed interest in WVU at positions of need, that's where the NIL was spent. Like in 2023, I'm thinking of guys like Rodney Gallagher, Josiah Trotter. Last year, I'm thinking Day Farmer. And again, because West Virginia turned a corner, it seemed like last season with winning the Duke's Mayo Bowl, winning 9 games, a lot of momentum building for this 2024 season, maybe there was more genuine interest on the part of these recruits that West Virginia didn't have to so heavily induce these recruits with NIL. With success, with winning, with putting players into the NFL, in this case for West Virginia, putting Zach Frazier in as a second-round draft pick, all of that breeds interest into your program. And that has been what was struggling so much under the Neal Brown era. I criticized Dana Holgerson for a lot of things, but developing talent, putting talent into the NFL, he was able to do that despite all of the recruiting laziness that he displayed during his time in Morgantown. On the other hand, I feel like because of the climb, that West Virginia's brand recognition across and still being in the Big 12 conference where they are misconferenced, and there are so many players in this region of the country that want to play in the ACC or they want to play in the Big 10. They don't want to play in the Big 12, or they want to go into the SEC, but I don't think they can make it necessarily if they're one of these northern schools. You have your cases in point, but by overall collectively. So now it feels like there was, out of this class, more genuine interest in West Virginia. So I'm going to talk about that. So again, I think West Virginia now, depending upon what happens with this class and the head coach hiring, how much money that the fan base is able to raise in NIL dollars after the head coach is hired, and then can West Virginia get into the transfer portal and fill some of these immediate needs at starting positions. I haven't talked about the 2025 roster already and depth chart and all that because we're not technically done with the 2024 season, but we're already turning the page and looking ahead because West Virginia's best player in Josiah Trotter isn't going to be back next season. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity potentially immediately for players like that are coming out of this high school recruiting class or last year's. So you might have some guys who are really chomping at the bit for playing time. This is still a Power 4 program. This is one that still feels like it's right on the cusp of competing for a conference championship, but it's because of the head coach that was the reason why everything fell apart this season. So that's kind of a looking ahead of what's going to happen in high school transfer recruiting. for this class specifically, we got to start all the way back to the 2023 Backyard Brawl and start first about wide receiver Tyshawn Dews, a 3-star, and I'm using rivals for all of when I talk about the stars, and the point rating, a 5.6 rating. 5'11", 160 pounds, out of Hurricane, West Virginia, Hurricane High School. He was the first commit out of this 2025 class. He was a participant in a June 2023 strong camp performance earlier that summer. Did take an official visit over the June 8th weekend this past summer as a formality with the intention of enrolling early this December. The only other offers for Tyshawn Dews were Kent State, Marshall, Akron, Eastern Kentucky. I feel like this is an example of West Virginia betting on an in-state kid who they saw at one of their summer camps. He was projected as one of the best players this high school season out of this recruiting class, at least, out of the state of West Virginia. So I think that's why West Virginia, liked what they saw. In-state kid. Feel like, at worst, if he can get into the program, put on weight, put on speed, he can be a special teamer. Or if it doesn't work out over a few seasons, he can transfer down. Now, Hurricane is in the West Virginia Class 4A state high school semifinals, taking on Spring Mills this Saturday with the chance to potentially take on fellow WVU signee Zaw Jackson's Huntington team in the finals next weekend. So kind of want to see, if there's anything that comes out of that game, and if the Hurricane wins, what does do in those couple of games. But so far this season, it's kind of been, okay. Just 40 catches for 655 yards and 3 touchdowns. So not a ton of volume there, but, over 10 yards a reception. Pretty nice numbers there. But then I look at a guy like Shalik Hampton on his team, 6'4", 220 tight end. He's really the one stealing the show. 45 catches, 845 yards, and 17 touchdowns. So again, Tyshawn Dews, glad to have him as a Mountaineer, as an in-state kid, but I think he's got a real uphill, battle to climb to prove that he's a Division I Power 4 player. So it's going to just take time and development. And is this new staff going to be one to want to wait? That's the question with him. Now, another 2023, 2025 signee who committed in the year 2023. Now, 4-star, 5.8 rating quarterback Scotty Fox, 6'2", 195 pounds, out of Mentor High School in Mentor, Ohio. West Virginia was able to secure Fox's commit early, November 18th, 2023. He was the second WVU commit of the 25 class. Perhaps a player who was flying under the radar that West Virginia built a relationship with early, and then he blossomed into a 4-star recruit, 13th now best player in the state of Ohio, and 8th best dual threat quarterback in the country. He's a part of a 13-1 team that went to the Region 1, Division 1 finals, lost 13-7 to St. Edwards. The numbers for a high school player, pretty good numbers here. 174 completions on 264 attempts, 2,638 passing yards with 33 touchdowns, did have 7 interceptions, also 61 carries for 328 yards and 7 touchdowns. I like everything about Scotty. I really do. I think he's a confident player, a confident passer with a great arm, and has a rushing ability. And I think he's probably more polished at this point in his development, coming in as a college freshman, coming in than Khalil Wilkins was. So can he immediately become West Virginia's third-string quarterback who shows out in West Virginia's developmental program if they decide to keep it, or something that looks similarly to what Neal Brown and Tyler Allen had done for players like Wilkins, Ryder Burton, previously Nico Marchiol, and then push Ryder Burton for the backup spot in the spring of 2026, depending if Nico Marchiol comes back for next season or the 2025 season. This quarterback room, might look a whole lot different depending upon what kind of style of play that this new head coach and high school or offensive coordinator wants out of his quarterbacks. Does he want more of a pure mobile runner? Because I think with all the quarterbacks now on West Virginia's roster, despite excluding Garrett Green, pass first, run second quarterbacks. Do they want to flip that? So, but I like Scotty. I really like what I see out of him. Just might take time and development. Does he want to wait? Does he want to develop? Or can he immediately jump some guys on this depth chart, and that's how early that he could start 2026. So now we got to jump ahead all the way to April of 2024, and that's when West Virginia got its first spring commit out of this class in three-star cornerback Zaw Jackson, 5'10", 185 pounds, out of Huntington, West Virginia, Huntington High School. He was a first-team All-State cornerback in 2023, so that was before this high school season that's just about to wrap up. Also a talented track athlete, very fast. Like Dews, coming out of the 2023 season, is arguably the top player in the state of West Virginia. Neal Brown was going to offer him, not going to try and let him go anywhere else. In 7 games for the Highlanders on offense, 45 carries for 367 yards and 7 touchdowns rushing. He also has 10 catches for 189 yards and 3 touchdowns receiving. On defense, he has 28 tackles. On special teams, 4 kickoff returns for 200 yards. Did have a 90-yard return for a touchdown against Riverside on September 20th. Huntington takes on number 1 seeded Martinsburg in the West Virginia Class 4A state semifinals Saturday. He's going to be at a position of flux that has been for some time at cornerback. So if he can show flashes early while continuing to get bigger, if he is truly 5'10", 180 or 185, he could develop, I feel like, some job security on this roster immediately. And then, try and compete, show some flashes, show what he can do in the spring, show what he can do in the fall. And who knows, maybe we see him next season. Maybe not immediately as a starter, but here and there, depending upon how he does. This is when West Virginia, I feel like, finally started to get rolling. Finally started to get momentum. It was on April 13th with the commitment of 3-star, 5.5 offensive lineman Aiden Buchanan, who's 6'8", 325 pounds, out of Our Lady of Good Counsel High School in Olney, Maryland, which is one of the top, if not the top, program in the state of Maryland that annually produces D1 Power 4 talent. At his size, he was a no-brainer offer. We also got to remember that freshman center Kyle Altuner was a 2024 commit. Good Counsel has been a standout at West Virginia's 7-on-7 and big man challenge competitions over the past few years, so credit Neal Brown and the coaching staff there for cultivating those relationships and developing that pipeline. My guy Skylar Callahan over at WVU on Sports Illustrated reported that Michigan really tried hard for him recently to flip him after Neal Brown was fired, but he honored his commitment, saying he was born to be a Mountaineer. And what he kind of reminds me of, or who he reminds me of, is former Mountaineer starting tackle Pat Egger. You remember him from 2009 to 2013, played for a powerhouse program outside of Pittsburgh, Thomas Jefferson High School. I think Buchanan can be that kind of player for WVU down the road, maybe multi-year starter. But he probably isn't beating out Johnny Williams at left tackle or Xavier Bosley at right tackle this offseason, but I love this signing. He has the build already, physical characteristics. He's going to come in there and compete. Next, April 27th, this was right after West Virginia's spring game. 3-star, 5.7 rated tight end Jackson Aquardi, a 6'7", 240-pound tight end from DeForest High School in DeForest, Wisconsin. When's the last time West Virginia's got a player from Wisconsin? So gotta credit tight ends coach Blaine Stewart here with finding a Cole Taylor type tight end, heir apparent from a non-traditional recruiting territory, building that relationship, and from November 2023, an offer, a short period of time, to April 27th, he gets the commit. West Virginia did as it's done recently, I feel like, at that position, adding one player, trying to stack roster depth with one tight end per class, which is what I feel like they should do. Quarty also plays center on his high school basketball team, athletic. Quite a few offers from other P4 programs, Indiana, Missouri, Michigan State, Colorado. I thought it was odd that he unofficially visited in-state Wisconsin, but they did not extend him an offer. He only visited West Virginia of all the schools on his list and is stuck by his commitment and signed, so he obviously likes West Virginia and is committed here. So, depending upon what shakes out with transfers, there's Traylon Davis, Greg Genross, Noah Bram, and Jack Samarco in front of him on the depth chart. So he has some time, I feel like, to marinate and adjust to D1 Power 4 caliber defenses. Just how quickly is that, and does he have good enough hands to come in and play immediately? If maybe Samarco's a blocking tight end and Quarty is a receiving tight end, down the line, we'll see how that combination happens. But I would say next year it's going to be Davis, it's going to be Genross at those 1A, 1B, 1-2 at tight end. On May 22nd, another big one. 3-star, 5.7 rated offensive lineman Gavin Crawford, 6'4", 300 pounds, also out of Our Lady of Good Counsel High School in Olney, Maryland. He was arguably a bigger commit than Buchanan. Again, credit that Good Counsel pipeline, Buchanan, Altuner, all in the everybody else making Crawford feel like a priority. He'd had an offer and visited Florida. He had an offer and visited UCLA, Maryland, Michigan State, Georgia, and Tennessee both offered him, but he didn't visit. Plays center at Good Counsel, and if Altuner ends up being the player that we think he's going to be and can be a starter perhaps as early as next season, maybe Crawford's a guy who does a little bit of both, position flexibility, trying out a little bit of guard, trying out a little bit of center, and then see who works out. So I think that's great for him. I think that's going to be great for his job security, and I think he's going to be a multi-year starter. Maybe we have as soon as 2026, 3 starters on West Virginia's offensive line, all from Good Counsel. So really glad to have Gavin Crawford as a part of the fold. Once again, this is June 3rd. This was the start of all of West Virginia's summer camp and official visit weekends over the summer that went through June and July, and this was a huge one at the time. This was one that said, wow, West Virginia is for real, especially later. A few weeks later in the month, West Virginia got its biggest commitment in years in Brody McWhorter at quarterback, who unfortunately has just recently decommitted because of the firing of Neal Brown. But who knows? There's still a lot of time for the fall 2026 class. But the player I want to talk about right now, maybe the best player, at least offensively, out of this class, now a 3-star, 5.7 rated running back, DeAndre Desanor, 5'9", 170 pounds, out of Delray Beach, Florida, Delray Beach Atlantic High School. Now, Desanor's played for 3 different high schools during his time in high school. First, North Broward Prep as a freshman and sophomore, American Heritage as a junior. Now, as a senior, he was at Delray Beach Atlantic. And now Atlantic made it to the Florida State 5A quarterfinals, losing 49-42 to St. Thomas Aquinas in overtime last Saturday. He's an all-purpose threat for Atlantic, 104 carries. He's the team leader with 697 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns, also 26 receptions for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think he's the biggest recruit West Virginia got in this cycle. Was rated a 4-star, who was the 165th best player in the country earlier this summer. But again, rivals dropped him because he's going to West Virginia, when he had offers to Alabama, Miami, Florida State, Louisville, Texas A&M. Credit to the relationships built by wide receiver coach Bilal Marshall there, who obviously has his hand on the pulse in the state of Florida. I think Desanor's fast. He's compact and physical. He adds the receiving dimension to his game. Can he be patient behind Jaheim White? And the outlier is, Jaheim White going to be back for next season? Looked like he just tweeted his resume the other day, with his carries and yards and touchdowns, and saying that all he's focuses on is the bowl game. picture today on Twitter of him and Chad Scott and saying that, from the first carry to the last, when there was an article about Josiah Trotter getting first team all Big 12 defense, or no, freshman defensive player of the Big 12. He's tweeting like a devil horns on him. So is Jaheim White going to be in Morgantown next year? Undetermined, seems unlikely, just based on what I'm seeing on social media. So is that a benefit to DeAndre Desanor's development? Can he overtake Dior Hubbard and Trayvon Dunbar immediately in the pecking order? If C.J. Donaldson comes back next season, can they put Desanor in there and fill that type of Jaheim White role? That's to be determined. But I love having him on this team. Really, really excited to see him play. The next weekend, 3-star, 5.7 rated outside linebacker Ramondo Johnson, 6'4", 240, Monarch High School out of Coconut Creek, Florida, committed. And they had a productive sophomore year at Wellington High School in Wellington, Florida, before, like Desanor, had a very strange high school career, I feel like, attending 3 high schools as a junior, including one in the state of New Jersey, and then settling in for his senior season at Monarch. Once again, credit Bilal Marshall and his state of Florida connections here on the recruitment because, wow, the list of offers was pretty long for Johnson. Miami, Louisville, Tennessee, Florida, Penn State, Texas A&M, Florida State, Mississippi State. The numbers don't pop off the page necessarily for his stats this year at Monarch. 39 tackles, but 7 sacks, 18 QB hurries. But watching his tape, wow. I feel like he has the perfect speed and size combination for a pass-rushing outside linebacker. To be this bandit spur, as a part of the old Jordan Leslie defense, I don't think he's a defensive end. I think there are some other guys that West Virginia's recruited that I think are going to play defensive end that are a little bit bigger than him, but I think Ramondo Johnson's faster, especially laterally. I don't necessarily think I put him inside. I think I put him outside. I think he can be that outside pass rush specialist who can also defend the run pretty well. Really like him. I like him a lot there at that outside linebacker position. Maybe could be someone who already, pushes Obina Onwuka, pushes Makai Byerson, Elijah Kinsler, someone who comes in there and tries to make a name for himself early and get some early playing time. Also, that same kind of weekend, 3-star, 5.6, I'm going to call a nose tackle or defensive tackle, Taylor Brown, 6'4", only 250 pounds, out of Wise High School in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Now, when Brown first committed, which was at the same time as now a decommit of Evan Powell, I didn't think much. I wasn't really all that impressed. Pitt, Memphis, Marshall, James Madison, Temple, Boston College. But after 247 rated him as a 4-star, and I saw his highlight tape, I went, whoa. Again, he's listed as a defensive end on Rivals, and at 6'4", 250, he's better suited at that defensive end or even a linebacker. But I'm saying that he needs to play on the interior of the defensive line, even if he only maxes out, I feel like it may be 280. 285. He can put on 35 pounds, in his few years in Morgantown before being a starter. I love his ability. I love it. I'm a little puzzled now in his senior season as to why he only has 20 tackles, but maybe he's clogging up space in the middle, taking on double, triple teams. You see that at the high school level going up against Division I talent. Now his Wise team is in the Maryland 4A State High School Championship game, taking on Quince Orchard tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. I want to see how he does. I want to hear how he does in there. But he's going to be, smaller. He's not as heavy, I feel like, that as you'd like to have in another commit that I'll talk about on the defensive line. But I really like what I see out of him. Quick twitch in between the A and B gaps and being able to defend the run and rush the passer. I really like what Taylor Brown gives. I'm really interested to see his development immediately. June 17th, 3-star, 5.6 According to Rivals Scale, safety Sammy Etienne committed, 6 foot, 180 pounds, Lakeland High School, Lakeland, Florida. He was a part of a group on the June 3rd weekend with Sirius Stinyard, Elgin Sessions, Cam Strong, who all visited at that same time. So there was this big group. Stinyard ends up committing, Sessions ends up committing, Cam Strong picks NC State. He did have an impressive early high school career at Auburndale High School, the same high school as Aubrey Burks, also Nate Gabriel, but then transferred to Lakeland for this senior season, one of the best programs in the state of Florida. They're 13-0, undefeated, playing Niceville tomorrow night in the Florida State 5A semifinals. Now, Max Preps, I'm only getting, he's played in 5 games, 16 tackles, 2 passes defense, but I'm seeing his senior season highlight tape posted on November 18th, and I'm loving what I'm seeing about how aggressive he is. ETN went down to the wire with also thinking about Kansas State, which Stinyard ended up picking, so I think this is a big pickup for West Virginia at a position of need in safety. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity, I feel like, for him starting immediately, right alongside Zay Jennings, Jacob Boyce. Also, June 19th, 3-star, downgraded to a 3-star, but 5.7 on Rivals Scale. Also nose tackle, Amir Leonard John Charles. Love this. If you follow my channel, you know how I love, in the nicest way possible, love big defensive linemen over 300 pounds. Love it. 6'4", 305, Nashville, Tennessee, Lipscomb Academy. West Virginia was his first unofficial visit, according to Rivals, in late January 2023, so almost 2 years ago. And I'm thinking that early connection paid dividends in addition to him being a legacy. His mom, Antoinette, was a swimmer at West Virginia because the offers, big-time offers, rolled in for him afterwards. Louisville, Michigan, Maryland, Tennessee. Then he got the West Virginia offer. A visit to Florida in January 2024 led to an offer. 2 visits to Texas, one in April and June, had an offer in between there. Officially visited West Virginia over the June 20th weekend, and then after visited Syracuse, then he committed. Two-way player who may have a higher ceiling on the offensive line, so it'll be interesting to see whether he sticks on the defensive line or the new staff moves him to offensive line. We'll see. But I just love that size. 6'4", 305 already as a high school, a college freshman. I think, and seeing some of his tape, he just crushes people at right tackle. Crushes them. Though, at a bit of an underperforming high school at the Division II AAA level, don't know the greatest competition that he went up against. But of what I saw in his high school tape, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this dude's massive, and he's also crushing people. Get him in Morgantown. So love having him as a commitment. Again, former 4-star downgraded to a 3-star. Late June, 2-star, 5.4 rated, inside linebacker Chris Filippo, 6'3", 210 pound. Out of Winmore, Pennsylvania, LaSalle College High School, where he played both safety but moved up to linebacker for his high school team. He really had the size and speed to play both and likes to hit. As a junior, 62 tackles, 7 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles, and an interception. Part of a LaSalle team that went 10-0. Then lost to St. Joe's Prep, arguably the best team in the largest division in the state of Pennsylvania, just 21-14 at the beginning of November, and for some reason that LaSalle team didn't make the playoffs. I don't have any other more stats for Filippo for his senior season to see how he did, but he is a starter for the team. What I think is just going to happen with him is, can he put on enough weight to play a middle linebacker, or is he going to be fast enough to play safety at the Division I level? That's going to be the question, because he's kind of a tweener. Sometimes tweeners are fun, and with a new coaching staff, they can potentially experiment with him, see how he does. And a player who likes contact is going to find ways on the field. That's unfortunately something that West Virginia has been missing, especially I feel like in the middle at its linebacking core, and especially pass coverage for a few years now. They don't have linebackers who defend the pass very well. So can Filippo kind of break the mold? Can he figure it out, his way onto the field that way? Maybe play a spear, which is a safety hybrid line, but it depends upon the new scheme that's coming. So we'll see with him. Day later, another linebacker, 3-star, 5.5 rated, Michael Hasty, 6'2", 220 pounds, excuse me, out of Douglas County High School in Douglasville, Georgia. Liked his list of offers. Minnesota, Indiana, Kentucky, Florida State, SMU, North Carolina, Pitt, UCF, Louisville. He only took one visit, and it was to West Virginia over the June 8th weekend. Listen to these numbers that he put up this season. 159 tackles this season. That's 137th in the country, 5th in the state of Georgia, 1st in their largest division, 6A. Wow. So where and how did Jeff Coons find Michael Hasty, and how did he get him to Morgantown? Might have just been a guy who kind of didn't really participate into the recruiting scene or the camp scene all that much, just wanted to take one visit. That's enough. I know where I want to go, and bam. So might be the best linebacker, maybe even defensive player that I feel about this entire recruiting class. We'll just see how early can he break onto the field with a couple of guys in front of him, Trey Lathan, Reed Carrico, who have gotten a lot of starting snaps for West Virginia this past season, the season prior at least for Lathan. So that's Hasty. June 29th, 3-star, 5.6 wide receiver, Jaleel Hall, 6'4", 190-pound wide receiver out of sorry, starting to lose my voice, I feel like. Monsignor Bonner, Archbishop Pendergrass Catholic High School in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. I think he's the best of the 3 wide receivers that West Virginia got in this year's class. He's the 18th. Well, it was 3 down to 2, just Dews and Hall. There was a flip on signing day I'll talk about. 18th best player in the state of Pennsylvania, 3rd best wide receiver. West Virginia beat out Maryland and Rutgers to get him. High school team, 13-1 in the Pennsylvania 4A state championship game tonight against Lampeter Strasburg. Last week, 5 catches, 104 yards, 39 catches for 701 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 carries for 83 yards rushing on the season. He's big. Good speed for a player that big. Coordination is there with his long strides and being a great jumper. I really like Jaleel Hall, like what I see out of him. But not a lot of production, maybe like they just don't pass the ball as much as, you would hope for. West Virginia, I feel like, has put an emphasis over the last 2 seasons on big transfer receivers, Devin Carter, Justin Robinson. Now I think they want to grow their own in Hall. Be a guy who can kind of follow in the footsteps, I feel like, of maybe a deep threat or possession threat. So we'll see how Hall develops, but I like that signing. Now then, there was a break. There's kind of a dead period. Seemed like that was kind of a wrap. West Virginia still did have scholarships to use as part of this class. Did have a few other commits at this point in time, which I'll talk about, had previously decommitted. And then it was right when this point in time when West Virginia kind of hit a snag in its recruiting. And you might remember I came on here and gave you a video over the summer talking about how West Virginia kind of hit a snag in its recruiting. Nick Moore committed to Tennessee instead of West Virginia after it seemed like it was signed, sealed, delivered that he was going to be a Mountaineer defensive, offensive lineman, just like Leonard John Charles. Grant Bierman picked Purdue, a linebacker. Wilnerson Telemock, who eventually now recommitted to West Virginia, picked Wisconsin. Also, Samari Reed picked Ole Miss. Carson Lawrence, who visited West Virginia that same weekend with all the other defensive backs, stuck with his commitment with Vanderbilt. Also, Dwayne Galloway, another recommitment to West Virginia, also picked Purdue. So July wasn't as pretty of a month But then in August, West Virginia got a big one. 3-star, 5.6 on the scale. Defensive end, Brandon Caesar, 6'4", 255. Defensive end out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. I love the raw power that I see out of Brandon Caesar, but just one who I think is going to have to work on his technique a little more, get a little more coordinated with his body, while adding weight. Because if he's going to play defensive end, I would hope that he's going to play at 275 or heavier. Also plays volleyball and wrestling. Found that interesting as two different sports that he plays. But I guess Michigan came after him hard, wanting him. Ohio State had an offer. Tennessee, Notre Dame, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State. That list alone tells me that there is something that coaches see in Caesar as a future starter. So I love having him as a Mountaineer. I was huge on saying that on Twitter whenever he committed. So that was great, especially after Telemock did not commit to West Virginia. So there was a little bit of a hole there on the defensive line that needed to be filled. Flash forward toward the end of the regular season, November 6th, Telemock commits. 3-star, 5.7, so a little bit higher on the grading scale according to Rivals than Caesar, also at a defensive end, 6'6", 250, Northwestern High School, one of the best high schools in the state of Florida for football, out of Miami, 6'6", 250. As a junior, he played at Monsignor Pace in Opelika, which is great for talent. I feel like that area of the country. He had 50 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 10 QB hurries this season. He's one of the leading tacklers on Northwestern's defense. Chose Wisconsin, like I said, on June 18th, but the staff just stayed on him from the day he committed and never gave up. So credit this entire staff on wanting to get him, and alongside Caesar, I feel like West Virginia has two bookend defensive linemen with Brown and/or John Charles in the middle. So I love what this defensive line's looking like. Love it. That's why, I really like what Andrew Jackson's done this year. From a recruiting standpoint, from a developmental standpoint, T.J. Jackson, I think maximizing the potential of Sean Martin, Fatorma Mulba. So if there's one guy I feel like on the defensive staff who deserves to be retained, it would be Jackson. So we'll see what happens there. Keeping those commits, I think, is vital because West Virginia's depth on the defensive line is very thin, and we'll talk about that moving forward. Then there were a few commits that came in that kind of pissed a lot of fans off because it's like, ooh, big deal. Right there around Thanksgiving, guys in 3-star offensive lineman Jameer Davis, 6'6", 305 out of Cincinnati, Ohio. 2-star offensive lineman Brandon Homedy, 6'3", 280 out of Parma, Ohio. And then 2-star athlete cornerback Tyrell Russell, 5'11", 175, a flip from Toledo. And that was thinking the case like, is Neal Brown getting fired? In the case of, we started to see a couple of decommitments in cornerback Terrence Edwards out of Virginia, choosing Michigan State, Elgin Sessions, decommitting from West Virginia, picking Georgia Tech. So instead, West Virginia wanting to try and fill these scholarships that they have available to use in the roster spot, go get Davis, go get Homedy. The only other offer that Davis had was Marshall. He did visit Illinois. I think Matt Moore just kind of likes his size here, and just like Justin Terry, just like Lucas Austin, is going to be a bit of a project if Matt Moore is retained. Guys that need to get into the system, get technique, build their strength and conditioning, get better nutrition that maybe years down the road. This is what I'm talking about. Same with Homedy. A guy didn't have any other Power 4 offers, gets the offer from Matt Moore, flips from Ohio immediately. So is he that caliber of player? Don't know. To be determined. Have to see how he competes and develops over the years to come. Or does he get run off? Then Tyrell Russell, same difference. Again, needed another cornerback commit or safety commit in that secondary, so you get him. Another a 2-star. Now we're talking all the way to signing day yesterday. 2 commits for West Virginia on signing day, in addition to keeping all of the ones that I talked about, despite Neal Brown's firing. And the biggest one, maybe one of the biggest recruits out of this class, is 3-star cornerback, previously a 4-star, Dwayne Galloway, 6'1", 175 pounds, Marion Franklin High School in Columbus, Ohio. I've been following Galloway, I feel like, since the summer, since he visited over that June 1st weekend. But then he went and chose Purdue, visited them June 8th, also took visits to Syracuse, Kentucky, and Penn State. So July 5th, picked Purdue. Alongside Grant Bierman at linebacker, I was heated. I really thought West Virginia had a chance here. As a guy from Columbus, Ohio, 4-star player, not getting an offer from Ohio State, a little bit confused on that. But West Virginia is going to take those guys that Ohio State potentially overlooks because they're so loaded for talent that they don't necessarily need. So, man, that was one that you'd wished you'd had at the time. But, man, when it counts on signing day, happy to have Galloway. And also he has a cousin who's now entered the transfer portal at tight end from Purdue. Who knows? Maybe once a new head coach is decided, he'll visit. So I think he was the 112th best player nationally when he committed in July, a 4-star. But he was part of a high school team that just went 4-6 in a lower high school division in the state of Ohio. I can't find any stats on him. Don't know. But what I've read from and talked with some of other folks who are a part of like West Virginia media scene, content creation scene. He's probably the best among this cornerbacks group to start challenge early, like him. So that's at the end of the day. Then also Julian Horton, 3-star, 5.5, 6 foot, 170 pound safety from Bel Air, Maryland, Bel Air High School, 2-way player, wide receiver, safety, visited for the UCF game. Then last weekend he went to Missouri, also was tied in recruiting to Maryland, and what I read in an article says he wants early potential at playing time. With now these players, decommitting because of Neal Brown's firing. Don't know what's going to happen with Shadon Brown this offseason. Who knows? He can come in there, don't care about the coaches, wants to come in and compete. He wasn't going to play for North Carolina. I mean, what's interesting for the strange circumstances, despite them also firing Mack Brown as their head coach. But hey, great. Let's take him. Let's try him out. Let's see if he can play. West Virginia needs defensive backs. So if guys can start as early as true freshmen, so be it. So I think I've just about hit on everybody else who has decommitted, who was previously committed. Evan Powell, guy, didn't like his offer list, so completely understand, no hard feelings if he wants to go try elsewhere. 6'4", 245, 3-star defensive end out of Huntingtown, Maryland. Tariq Mallory seemed like loved the social media recruiting limelight that there was. Previously committed to Wake Forest, visited West Virginia and flipped early in the summer. I think was one of their first summer commits or late spring. 6'5", 190 pound wide receiver, 3-star, 5.5 out of Cheshire, Connecticut. Ultimately picked Florida State. And I wonder if Florida State is just looking at his size, seeing that they want to throw jump balls to him. And see where he goes from there. But since West Virginia already has Jaleel Hall, I'm not necessarily broken. Had a large recruiting class of wide receivers last year. Still have some guys who are young, who are in development, and I think they might go to a transfer portal to add just another one for next season. So not heartbroken over Tariq Mallory, not going to cry over it. Also, Montaven Quisenberry, although I was really intrigued by him, ultimately picked West Virginia over Kentucky over the summer, only to decommit when the West Virginia's 2024 season was headed south and in the tubes, and picking Kentucky. Probably, wanted to keep an in-state kid home, giving him a really good NIL offer. And West Virginia is kind of okay at players of his size, and where he would fit in the depth chart. But I mean, sounds like he's having a hell of a high school career. And down there in Boyle County, Kentucky, Neal Brown's home. Would have loved to see him in a Mountaineer uniform. Want to see how he eventually does with the Wildcats. I think, and then Thomas Barr was a early commit as West Virginia's class. I think he was one among the top first three, but I don't know if this was a decision by the staff or he saw the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to play or wasn't necessarily Power 4 caliber, but he ends up decommitting from West Virginia, goes to Buffalo. That's where he signed. So no hard feelings there, Thomas Moore. Go rock out for the Bulls. That's it in a nutshell. That's the entire class. I think I've kind of given you the scope over across the position group, so I don't need to necessarily reiterate them. I think a nice balance of some project players with some guys who could potentially challenge for earlier playing time. Now, again, I always say if you're banking on true freshmen to be starters for your program, what does that say about you? That is a red flag. That is a concern. So I still think West Virginia is going to, depending upon the head coach, again, the NIL support, all of that, try and go ham at some positions in the transfer portal, and we just have to see who wants to stick around from this current roster for 2025. So that's it. I think it's a decent class. Obviously could be better with some more proven products. And unfortunately, West Virginia has not gotten to that point again where they're recruiting back into the top 25, that they're, that's still since 2007 with Noel Devine that West Virginia signed a 5-star high school recruit. Now, West Virginia still can get those, few 4 stars in a class, predominantly 3 stars, and then, I'm saying that they're trying more than ever to spread those scholarships thin, get some 2-star guys even position flexibility, that can be experimental, who might not be Power 4 caliber players, but they want to give an opportunity to develop. So I understand the recruiting strategy. I'm not always so thrilled with it. I think sometimes that but I think that was trending in the right direction last summer, that West Virginia was getting better and could attract, higher quality talent because the team seemed to be turning a corner. How that impacts next year's recruiting class, no idea. But West Virginia, what it's going to have is a new head coach to sell. A new head coach to come up with a new tagline, with a new mantra, and saying they're going to try and be a rebuilding program, and I want you here. But I think that high school recruiting needs to be one of the strong suits of the new head coaching hire. And going after some bigger fish at least than what West Virginia shot for, and missed occasionally or didn't even try for in recent years. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Hope I gave you the best analysis I could. Again, wish I could have done this last night on the the evening of signing day to talk about it, but now have it a day later for you. So thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia. Going to talk more about, I feel like, basketball. We'll have the college football playoff bracket eventually availed after this weekend's conference championship games and what that means for college football. And then West Virginia has the Frisco Bowl. Yay! Next weekend, December 17th, Frisco, Texas. It's like the Scott's Coffee Bowl or something like that against the University of Memphis, who I would consider a top 25 program at 10-2. So I'll have a new game preview, and then we'll have a breakdown after that bowl game is over. When you're in a mid-December bowl, it never feels good. 6-6 record, fired head coach, players already hitting the transfer portal. But we need to close the chapter on this 2024 season. But we already get a look into the 2025 season thanks to these 21 new commits. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hail West Virginia. Like this video so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. And I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel if you like all this analysis. I bring it to you like this each and every week. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog. They'll have a lot of fun doing it as well. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.